Hello, welcome to WATCHESTV. We're here at the Watches Club in the old town of Geneva with our good friend Thomas Baillod, founder of the Watch Trade Academy. We had already spent some time, like 1.5 years ago, talking about the evolution of distribution sales channel in watchmaking, because I mean there's a lot at stake currently. And so today, in a context a little bit complicated for the Swiss watch industry, we've lost significant volumes of productions. How can distribution kind of have any impact, or is it an answer to this problem? So we're going to talk about this today with Mr. Baillod. So Thomas, tell me.
Marc-André, thanks for inviting me. When you say we have a problem, yes, we have a problem. And I think it's good to qualify, or let's say to understand the size of that problem, because we can measure it. It's called 3.5 million watches in terms of volume that the industry has lost in 2019. Is it a lot? Yes, because it represents close to 15% of the total export, which is not a small thing. And the problem is that it accelerates.
Yeah.
Between 2011, we were at 30 million pieces, to 2018, down to 24 million pieces. The industry has lost 6 million pieces in 7 years. Roughly 850,000 pieces a year.
Indeed. But the thing that kind of, in a certain way, makes you not look at that reality is that the overall turnover of the industry is more or less the same.
Well, there is a distinction between value and volume. We are speaking about volume. The value, if you look at the FH figure, we're still fine. It's a progression of 1.2%, tepid progression, but still a progression. But that's the tree hiding the forest. Because we're speaking about a very small portion of the export, 7%, that make close to 70% of the value. So that portion, the 3,000 export plus, which you have to multiply by 2.5, so it's roughly watches you would find in the market at 7,500 plus, the luxury market, this is doing fine. But the rest, the 93% of the export in volume is suffering, and especially the below 500 export, meaning watches at 1,500, 1,200 in the market, that segment represents 80% of the production. One of the biggest issues we have today is distribution, because brands for centuries have been trading the same way. And by the way, that's the problem today. We're still selling like in the 80s.
But you have like two brands like Patek Philippe and Rolex that are keeping to that model.
Absolutely.
And are doing pretty successfully regardless.
Absolutely. And I would even add, you have one brand that does exactly the opposite, which is Audemars Piguet, that is successful too. So my takeaway on that, we'll come back later, is that you have to be coherent in your ecosystem. Let's remember what is distribution.
Yes.
We have the distributors, which is the long leg that allows you to access to remote places, South Africa, Indonesia, Chile. So you would sell to a distributor, and then within the country you have the ramification, which are the fingers, which could be in that case the retailers, which allows you to size the market. So we had to build a worldwide network that allows you within 2 to 3 kilometers away from your place to go to a store, which is a secure place for trade, authorized retailer, where you will meet someone who will give you a service and information, and then you can try the watch, put it on your wrist, and acquire it and take it. This setup is extremely good in terms of customer experience, but it's extremely costly, and that's the problem. On the other side, on the opposite, the digital today, in its simple form of selling online, allows the brand to use a very short channel that goes from the warehouse of the companies to the wrist of the end consumer. And of course, this reduced distance means augmented margin, but it's very poor in terms of customer experience. So we have to find a way today so that the retailers can still be in the loop, can still get rewarded for the service they offer, regardless of the sales happening in the store or not. This is what we call phygital. Because the problem is that today, stores have become point of touch and not point of sales. The people go in the store, they use the service, the place, they use the stock, they hear all the advices of the salespeople, and then say thank you very much. They get out of the store, they go online, not to name Corner 24, etc., and they find usually a lot of those timepieces at a lower price. So it's unfair for the retail because they offer the service and they're not paid for it because they just get the margin on sales. So the phygital approach is an approach where you would combine the best of those two worlds, the higher margin somehow for the brands, secure a decent margin for the retail, having less investment maybe on the stock, etc., and still offer a customer experience.
So today, do you have like kind of concrete examples? And I know that you've been working also on something slightly different than what we've been talking, but pushing a little bit the thinking even further and being quite creative with this. What are kind of some of the solutions concretely that one can think of?
In fact, I had a lot of ideas which I wanted to validate, so I decided that I had to test it. And of course, I approach a food brand and say, can I test something a bit weird with your brand? Nobody would say yes. So I said, okay, let me create my own brand that was meant to be like a laboratory. And that's how I created my brand. Don't ask me the name because you cannot pronounce it, and that's made on purpose. So that I would test a new way, and it's really concentrated of a lot of things that I'm teaching, by the way, in my academy. That meant to be tested and to solve that equation of phygital.
So go in the details. We want to know.
In the details. Yes. So first, the price. Of course, it should be a price that allows a bit impulsive purchase. That's why I wanted to have something below the 400 Swiss franc. Therefore, I took the decision not to make it Swiss made, but still, you have a double oscillator. You have a domed sapphire crystal. Stainless steel 316L, deploying buckle, Côte de Genève. I mean, I've really played well with this. And as you understood, it's not really about making profit out of this experience. It's about offering a huge delta between price and perceived value. And I was at the post office and I had an old man queuing behind me that say, you have a very beautiful watch, what is it, etc. And we started to discuss 2 minutes queuing. And the guy called me at home. He said, look, I didn't sleep last night. I want to buy 2 watches, etc. And I said, wow, isn't it great that someone just by looking at your watch really wants to buy it? So if you take again the 3 main costs of distribution, of retailing, which is the place, the service, and the stock, I'm disrupting these 3 things because the place is your wrist. The service, you will have somehow to make it, let's say you will have to explain my brand. Why? Because the first question everybody will ask you when they see my watch on your wrist is, what's the brand? So I on purpose took a brand name that you cannot pronounce, BA 1110D or 1110. I don't even know myself, but it doesn't matter because it's not a brand, it's not meant to be a brand, it's a concept. And therefore they will do the second thing, which is the service. They will explain something that could create curiosity. And the third thing, which is the stock, you will not give the watch from your wrist to the person. You will transfer one right, because when you buy one of my watch, you get the watch and you get 4 rights of sales. So it's only the affluender, as I'm calling them, that has the right to pass on one of right to purchase. So the community is choosing who gets in. And when you give one of those rights, the person can buy the watch. And I will drop ship, I will send directly the watch to the person who purchased. It's like 24 or 48 hours when the stock will be available. That will be end of January. And so I disrupt those 3 main costs, which allow me to offer this watch at a price that is nowhere close to reasonable, because for 360 Swiss franc, or equivalent to 360 US dollar, plus tax, which in the US doesn't apply, you get 1 watch, 4 rights, and when you sell your 4 rights, I offer you a second watch. Because, you are doing my marketing, you are doing my sales, so I reward you for that. And it stops there. And of course, people say, yeah, but it's a pyramidal game.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But there is a base to my pyramid. Because when the people buy, you have to accept the rule that it stopped. There are 3 different versions. Each one is numerated, and it's written, you own the number XXX. And it's limited to 9,999 pieces each. And when you reach that number, if you haven't sold your right, the worst thing that will happen to you is that you bought a beautiful watch, one for 360, which is okay. Yeah. And this is why.
Yeah, because I mean, some people are just interested in buying the watch. I mean, they maybe.
And in fact, there are a lot of people that tells me, look, I just want to buy your watch. I don't care about your thing. It's okay for me. I don't care. Enjoy your watch. The fact is that without you trying to promote it, people will come to you. And the other thing is that I'm receiving a lot of requests from people who wants to get a ride. Because if you go on my website, it's closed. I mean, I'm doing exactly the opposite as everybody does in the market. They try to increase the touch point as much as possible to get all the customers. You cannot enter my website if you don't come recommended by someone, if you don't have the key, which is opposite to the logic, commercial logic. But it means, and for me, it allows me to create something which is, let's say, the last test of my laboratory. It's not only that the people do recommend the community, but of course, I will be approaching the trade, because ultimately that's what I want to solve. I've been dealing with distributors and retailers for 15 years, 16 years. I respect them and I want to find something to solve their problem. And what is the solution? I will go to the retailers and tell them, look, can you give me just 40 centimeters of your window? I will put my 3 watches. And the people who wants to buy, I mean, they come to your store, they see that watch, that price, they can test it. And because if you just see an image and you see 360 and you see all the properties of the watch, you just say, there's a trick somewhere. It's not true. So you have to test it. And when the people do so in the store, then they will have to scan something, which is the unique code of the retailer, based on a technology that I'm partnering with, which is called Meocean. That is absolutely great because it allows me as a brand to establish a contact with the people who scan, which means the end consumers, but it includes a referent, which means in that case the point of sale. So the person who goes in the store, tries the watch, scans the code, and 2 weeks later wants to buy it, still I can trace and reward the store for the service. A smaller commission, it's not 50%, it's less.
Yeah, but it didn't cost them much.
But it didn't cost them anything.
Yeah.
Just 40 centimeters. And you're sure to get something. Okay. And what happens, and we spoke at the beginning, the customer get out of the store and say, I will buy the watch online. He goes on my website, she goes on my website, and the question is, do you have a code? No. Go back to the store. Yeah. Because only the store has the code. And because I'm not selling watches to the store, I'm selling rights to sell watches, yes. Which is applying the trading law to the watch industry.
But this obviously go way beyond your experiment with this watch. I mean, it's something that could be
I'm validating different things. The first thing being to be able to launch a brand on a crowdfunding on LinkedIn, yeah. Which I think was the first example. It worked well, sold more than 200 watches in 1.5 months, enough, to launch the brand. And of course, the idea is to test the fact that today the customers are not just customers. In marketing, we always speak about customer-centric. The marketing is totally customer-centric. And usually you see the customer in the center and you see everything around the 360 of the marketing. So it's circular. Why do we, in distribution, still have a linear approach? That famous sell-in, sell-out. So it's a tube. The brand push at one extremity of the tube, and at the other extremity, you have the end consumer. We are not the end. That's finished. Mm-hmm. We have to rethink, and that's why I call them affluenders. I've created that name. Affluender is a short name for ambassador. It's not just a customer, it's your ambassador. He, she wears probably your watch that has an influence. I mean, not only proactively on social network, which a lot of people do, but just going, have a drink with friends at work, at home, people will see your watch. So you have an influence, and I give them the right to sell.
So, pushing a little bit further this idea and concept, would, for instance, an affluender, could you also tie him in with rewarding the local retailer or something like that,
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, this applies to everything, and that's the magic of this Meocean. I'm partnering with another company in the US, Laser Hologram, which have created an amazing new type of hologram that don't exist. Holograms used to be those green things that you would see like this. They get to a definition of 10K. Your TV is probably a 4K. So they get way beyond this. I think they even got to 18K, 18,000 line per millimeter, totally full color. So it allows you to have the product in front of you without the product being here. So you really literally see it, see the product. So again, as we said, it's very interesting because you can be mixing things. We'll be coming to that. So, for instance, I'm putting that QR code, which is a modified QR code from Ocean, in that hologram, which allows me to turn any place where I could put my QR code here, and you would see the watch, which is not there, so I'm disrupting the stock, and you could scan that QR code, buy the watch, and I will know that the scan has been made here, and the WATCHESTV will get a commission. We can even do it online. We can put a QR code on your...
Yeah, we're going to try. This is an experiment. Yeah.
And the good thing is that, and that's why I've created lately a new hashtag. I'm pretty prolific in creating hashtag lately. But I think it does portray very much what it is. I call it Tiapos. This is a point of sale. And a wrist can be a Tiapos. The WATCHESTV can be Tiapos, a store can be Tiapos, a hairdresser can be Tiapos, a party with friends can be Tiapos. So an occasion, a place, a person can become a point of sales. That's the place where the sales happen, and you can reward that place.
Okay, so in a few months from now, when this concept will have been more demonstrated, how do you think you can take it in a certain way and, pass it on?
What I understood from the fourth industrial revolution is that we're not creating anything new. We're just using existing thing, which put together creates something new. So I'll give you examples. We all saw black hole last April. Okay, nothing special with black and hole. But I mean, I think what was amazing about it, not so much the picture, because we were all a bit disappointed, but the fact that we could take a picture of a black hole. We didn't build a bigger telescope for that. We put in relation all the existing telescope, which together allowed to go further than whatever individual telescope could do. So that's collaboration. Take another example, Daniel Wellington. I know in Switzerland we all tend to laugh at this entry price, but we're wrong. We should rather interest ourselves on what they do, because they observed they had a production cost, of $12, $15 roughly of a watch. And then they observed that the youngster, because of mobile phone and the camera on the mobile phone linked to the social network, could start to promote themselves on social media. And they said, look, I have that person that when he or she takes a picture have 100,000 followers, and I can send that person a $12 watch, and you divide 12 by 100,000, that gives 0.00012. And then you take the back cover of a magazine that has probably the same circulation. You pay $20,000 instead of 12, and you understand why Daniel Wellington was so successful beside all the things that they made correct, but they created the influential marketing. So for me, the future answer, and that's what I'm trying to experience with my brand concept, is to try and mix different things to create new answers to the market. Because today, if you can come up in the market and say, look, I offer you a better price, a decent margin for the retailers, and you can have the experience to try the watch and still buy it directly, whether online or in the store, of course, everybody wins something, and everybody would be adopting that model.
No, I think it's a very interesting concept. I think it applies pretty well for people that are indeed launching new brands, where indeed they won't have the marketing budgets to use the same tricks like everybody else, but to use indeed the end, the person that's end consumer as that's the best ambassador. And if he bought the product, believes in the products, he will obviously be a fantastic ambassador.
Of course, but why not for brands to select a limited edition, which would go only through that way of selling?
Yeah. No, it's going to be, interesting times ahead. Yeah. So we'll probably pick up in another year or so and see where we stand, and see indeed if other players.
Let's keep thinking together. Let's keep experimenting, because.
But let's try indeed. Yeah.
The paradigm has changed. Yes. Period. Yeah. We are entered in the digital world. We have to embrace it, because if we just, as we say in French, mettre la tête dans le sable, I don't think that will work, and we already see the consequences. So I think we should be future facing and not looking backward like where is my cheese?
Yeah, of course. But again, goes back to people sometimes having old habits, a little bit reserved for change, but we'll see. And it's a bit Darwinism world anyhow, you know, and evolution will adapt or die. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time here. It was very interesting, and like we said, we'll pick it up in a little while and see where it goes. But until then, viva watchmaking. Different watchmaking.